Coming up on the Men at the Movies podcast, we talk about Joe versus the Volcano. Joe is a man who is losing his soul, a man that life happens to, a man that, frankly, needs to get his balls back. This movie is about Joe's journey to become who he was meant to be. And like us, he can't get there without going through hardship and struggle. May you live to be 1,000 years old, sir, and let's discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being.
Take me to the volcano!
Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me is, you get Paul squared today. You get two Pauls. Joining me from Cincinnati, Ohio, is my buddy Paul Nichols. How you doing, Paul?
Hey, doing great, Paul. Always good to connect with another Paul. It's always a good day.
Yeah, there's and actually a cool one for a change, because like if you watch a lot of movies or TVs, especially like when I was growing up, the Pauls were always the dorks, the nerds, the dweebs of the shows. There's not too many cool Pauls out there, so at least we found each other.
There aren't. Yeah, right. I mean, when the Wonder Years came out, you know, the nerdy guy was Paul, and everybody loved Winnie Cooper and thought Paul was a nerd. So that was great.
Yeah. So we're excited about this. I think I got a recommendation from our website at menatthemovies.com saying, hey, you guys should do Joe versus the Volcano. I was like, yeah, man, thank you. It is on the list. We have it on in our ever growing list of hundreds of movies to eventually do one day. And then you reached out. I think it might have even been about a completely different subject. Talking about the Carolina Outpost that we talk about, the men's event we do here in Charlotte. And we ended up talking about movies, and you're like, dude, you should do Joe versus the Volcano. I was like, haha, this is the second time I've heard this. We need to move this up the scale. And we had such an enjoyable conversation. I was like, why don't you just come on and talk about it? And then about a week ago, I got another email from the website saying, you guys should do Joe versus the Volcano. So I'm like, I got it. We're doing it. I've heard you, Lord.
Well, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and like right before we jumped on the call about something totally unrelated. And he said, what are you doing this afternoon? I said, I'm going to be recording a podcast about Joe versus the Volcano. He goes, dude, that's my favorite movie of all time. Like, all right. Hey, we appear to have struck a nerve here. So I'm stoked to get into this. This is one of my all-time favorites. And I'm glad you were game for doing this.
Oh, yeah. And I'm always excited to, like I said, we had such an enjoyable conversation back last year. And it was just like, oh, man. Let's see what happens, because we can deep dive into all kinds of stuff. Yeah,
for sure. And there's so much depth here, right? I mean, like we were talking about the other day, if we could just snorkel around in some of all the high level stuff, or we could take a really deep dive. And this is one of those movies where it's absolutely possible to do both.
Yeah, and I was surprised when I looked up some details about it. This movie came out in 1990, which I felt like it was a much earlier movie, but it was after, Tom Hanks had hit it big and then did this movie, because it kind of feels like an earlier movie, but it came out after Splash, after Big, after Dragnet. He did some awesome, Tom Hanks is, one of our iconic generational actors. I feel like this was also a little bit of his prep work for Castaway.
Yeah, it feels like that, doesn't it? And this is like forgive the other podcast mentioned here, but this is like his apex mountain of 80s funny Tom Hanks, but it's like his transition, because after this was like Philadelphia, and then you mentioned Castaway and Forrest Gump, and we really get to see he's got some chops as an actor. And I mean, I remember him from Bosom Buddies, when I was a kid.
That was one of his first.
Yeah. And he was on Family Ties as the drunk uncle and all that. And he's rangy. And so, but you get some classic funny Tom Hanks in this movie too, but also some poignant and some serious work.
You said this is one of your favorite movies, and obviously, it was enough that I was like, hey, come on the podcast. So what is it that you love about this movie? What resonates for you?
I think one of the biggest things is, Joe is kind of an everyman, and I'm thinking about, it came out in 1990. I was in the 8th grade in 1990, and so I didn't have the soul-sucking corporate experience that you see at the beginning of the movie, but for whatever reason, I loved the adventure story. I think I loved the coming to life and just the whole tone of the movie. It's kind of a magical realism, and you've got to just kind of give yourself over to that world. And I've always loved the hero's journey stories, and this is a goofy version of the hero's journey for sure.
Yep.
But you see Joe coming to life, and then affecting the world around him, in a positive way, and just his whole. I hate to keep using the word journey, but the path that he takes is kind of universal as men, the path that we all take. And that just, every time I watch it, I feel like I see something new in the movie.
Yeah. I haven't watched it in many years. And then I watched it with a friend of mine last night, and we were both, my buddy was like, man, I forgot what a good movie this was.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's so much depth to it.
Yeah. And you compared it a little bit. You compared it to Walter Mitty, which I thought was spot on, even in a lot of ways in tone of the movie. A little tongue-in-cheek humor, a little silly at times, but ultimately pretty deep. So just a quick synopsis of the story. Joe works at some sort of company that creates rectal probes and petroleum jelly. It's a
one-stop shop.
And I love the sign that said over 712,000 satisfied customers.
Yes.
And the job just appears to be basically a rectal probe type of job. And so he's always sick. He feels sick. He goes to the doctor. The doctor says, those ominous words that everybody dreads when they go to see the doctor.
You have a brain cloud.
He has a brain cloud. And he's got 6 months to live. And this other guy, this rich guy, comes and wants him to go jump in a volcano so that he can get some sort of chemical mineral from the island of Wapani Wu. Basically, the guy gave him his credit card, said, go spend it, enjoy the rest of your life. And chaos ensues, as typically does in these Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan movies.
Yeah, chaos and hilarity.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You see him, just from the very beginning going into that, horrible job and just how everything is gray and just, literally lifeless. And, from the lights to the coffee to, his boss, on the phone and
stepping in mud puddles.
He's stepping in the mud puddle. You see somebody step on the daisy, the one thing that's trying to live in this parking lot. And, everything, is just pointing to, this is awful. And even to the conversations with his boss having on the phone, I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? And, and he keeps repeating that over and over and over again.
I'm not arguing that with you. I'm not arguing that with you. I'm not arguing that with you. I'm not arguing that with you, Harry.
My family uses that line to this day.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah. And I have no response to that. And so, it's
exactly.
That's one we use a lot. Joe just, you feel bad for the guy, that here's this guy that, and you learn later that, that he was a firefighter and,
Right.
Was actually a hero and got taken out. And, he decided, okay, if I'm going to be taken out, and you never find this out in the movie, you just kind of have to infer it, but he goes to work in this tiny little room with these horrible people, and he's in a place where he's not tested. He doesn't have to come through for anybody. He's just, he's just going to live out, presumably.
And he has no power.
Yes, he has.
Right?
He can't even put the orders into the printers.
He's like, you won't let me order them. I told you twice. I told you 3 weeks ago. I told you 2 weeks ago. Did you tell me last week, Joe? And the ultimate, managerial comment. Well, I know you told me twice, but did you tell me last week? He's like, get those catalogs. He's like, you're right here. It's
right.
like, I can't order them. You have to order them. And this scene, the whole opening scene of the movie, as he walks by his boss's desk, his boss who has a set of artificial balls, which there's no life in this movie. He's even, Meg Ryan's first character, Dee Dee, comes over. She's like, what's wrong with your shoe? And because the sole's coming off, he's like, I'm losing my soul. And yes, that is what we see. We see a guy who's lost, who I think if you piece together all those puzzle pieces from his past as a firefighter, he saved 2 kids and then went back up for a third. He had close brushes with death to the point where he became a hypochondriac, where I think his body was sort of rejecting the things that his mind had seen. He's like, you got to get out of this because it's going to kill you.
Yeah.
Instead, he went to some job where nothing was at stake. It's all about what was it? The advertising archive library was his area of expertise.
Yeah, such that it is, and his boss even says, and this boss being a typical freaking corporate boss, and I've had some crappy, but not as bad as, Mr. Artificial Balls Waturi, but he said, I put you in charge of the entire advertising library. And Joe's like, you mean this room? And, he's just got this, as powerless as he is, he's still got some cynicism to him. And I think on some level, he even knows before he goes to see the doctor of what just a absolute wreck his life is. And, he's like a boat on a river in neutral. He's just going wherever the current's going to take him, and he has no power.
Yeah. Yeah. The phrase you had used was he was a man that life happens to at this point.
Yeah.
Because he mentions actually on the date with Dee Dee that he saw things. Like, he never dives into it, but I think he might have, maybe there were kids he couldn't rescue. You see things you can't unsee. You see the trauma of the world you live in. And you're just like, oh, I can't save all of them, so I won't save any of them. And I'll just go do this job where I'm not risking myself, where there's zero risk, because he's living in fear. And again, going back to that Walter Mitty comparison, where Walter is working in the negative asset room. I mean, there's so many similarities and parallels when you really start diving into it.
Yeah, there really are. And Joe goes from somebody whose life is happening to even, like, it's not an instant transformation. He's not like flipping the page and totally becoming a new guy. I mean, in some ways he is, but he's still got, the old, some passivity that is still working out of him. But even when he comes back from the doctor, he sees that daisy that was crushed, and he stoops down and tries to pick it up and tries to inflect himself into his world and tries to, offer even some strength right there. And that's just the next step on his journey, that he goes and, really offers some strength and says, yeah, I'm here. I've got to do something in this world. I'm not just going to be a passive, a leaf on the pond,
and we like to talk about a lot of these movies, whether that's sort of suffering or trauma, these events that happen help us to prioritize what matters.
Yeah.
They reveal who we really are. And so Joe getting the news that he's got 6 months left helps him to identify what's important. And he realizes his job at the rectal probe factory is not that important.
Right.
I guess he gets tired of taking it up the ass from his boss with fake balls.
Yeah.
And he says he's going to leave. So he tells his boss he's going to leave. His boss is basically like, go, fine. And he tries to, even on his way out, the man with fake balls is trying to minimize Joe, who's actually showing some balls for the first time in like 8 years.
If you're leaving, leave. You'll get your check. And I promise you, you'll be easy to replace.
I should say something.
What are you muttering?
This life, what a joke. This situation, this room.
Joe, maybe you should just go.
You look terrible, Mr. Waturi. You look like a bag of shit stuffed in a cheap suit. Not that anybody could look good under these zombie lights. I can feel them sucking the juice out of my eyeball. Suck, 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 suck. $300 a week. That's the news. For $300 a week, I've lived in this sink, this used rubber.
You watch it, mister. There's a woman here.
Don't you think I know that, Frank? Don't you think that I am aware that there is a woman here? I can smell her like a flower. I can taste her like sugar on my tongue. When I'm 20 feet away, I can hear the fabric of her dress when she moves in her chair. Not that I've done anything about it. I've gone all day, every day, not doing, not saying, not taking the chance for $300 a week. And Frank, the coffee, it stinks. It tastes like arsenic. These lights give me a headache. If they don't give you a headache, you must be dead. So let's arrange the funeral.
You better get out of here. I'm telling you.
You're not telling me nothing.
I'm telling you.
Why, I ask myself, why have I put up with you? I can't imagine. But I know. It's fear, yellow freaking fear. I've been too chicken shit afraid to live my life, so I sold it to you for $300 freaking dollars. Oh, wait! You are lucky I don't kill you! You're lucky I don't rip your freaking throat out! But I'm not going to! Maybe you're not so lucky at that. Because I'm gonna leave you here, Mr. Waturi. What could be worse than that?
And there's a lot of dynamics with the concept of death, the concept of soul. You know, even when Angelica is even asking him about, have you considered suicide? You know, and these ideas of death. You know, he threatens him with death, but death would not be the worst thing. Death is leaving him there to continue on in that lifeless existence.
Frank has, he even said earlier, I feel terrible after childhood. It's a fact of life. And, he has been,
right.
He has completely been taken out and, emasculated literally, as, artificial balls on this guy's desk. And yet he's lording his little tyrant kingdom with Joe, the passive guy. And then, I don't know who that zombie guy is who doesn't have any lines, but he looks terrible. And then, Dee Dee, little mousy Dee Dee, and, that's his whole domain that he just lords everything over. And, then when Joe finally comes alive, Frank doesn't know how to respond. And one thing I really love about that scene is when he's talking about, how I can smell her perfume, I can taste her like sugar on my tongue. And you see when Joe starts to come alive and you see how Dee Dee responds and she, she sees that, maybe I'm not just this mousy little corporate drone. I have some beauty to offer. And, and she even starts to come alive. And, when a man really starts to come alive, great things can possibly happen. Good things definitely happen. Great things can happen in the people around him. And, we even see just a tiny little glimpse of that. But yeah, I love when Joe's even walking out, he goes, I should say something. And it's almost like you can see it on his face, like, I have nothing left to lose. I'm going to go for it. and he does, and it's awesome.
Right. And even earlier, it was Dee Dee had asked him, why do you let him talk to you like that?
Yeah.
And that's sort of, again, you see this almost, it's not instantaneous, but there is a sudden shift. Joe goes from very pale, very blue, to now he actually has color in his cheeks and some tone to his skin.
Right.
He's no longer a zombie. And there's a line that comes up later about most of the world is asleep.
Yes.
And Joe started his life at his dinner date with Dee Dee. She's like, you're so intense. And he's like, I really used to be back when he was a firefighter. He was intense and he cared about the big questions. He cared about who he was. He cared about why he was there. But something took him out. So we don't know. But something caused him to shift from being the hero to being a nobody.
Yeah.
And I think we resonate with that as men because we all have childhood dreams. You know, for me, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And then I got like 4th or 5th grade and I needed glasses, and you can't be a fighter pilot and need glasses. So
yeah, for me, I wanted to be a helicopter pilot. Same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And somebody said, well, why didn't you go just still be a pilot? I was like, oh no, I didn't want to fly a 747. I wanted to fly an F-15 Eagle.
Oh yeah. 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 For me, it was a Huey Cobra. And, I'm 6'7" and I'm an offensive lineman. And I tried to sit in a Huey Cobra at an air show one time. And the kind Marine right there, he said, there are other aircraft you can fly. It's not a Huey Cobra. But, my life took a different path, and that's fine. But those childhood dreams, to your point, it's at some point those are going to be opposed. We're going to be taken out. And then, Joe took, what do you say, 4.5 years of living there or of working there until, then the doctor comes and says, you have a brain cloud. And that's whatever that is. And that's a catalyst that brings him, kind of wakes him up. And, you can almost see the amazement on his face that he did that. He sold his life for $300 a week to, how he responded with Dee Dee at dinner. And he absolutely is coming to life, which we see in the rest of the movie through the color, through, his time with the limo driver, with Marshall. That was just beautiful.
That was a probably the first pick that didn't make the cut, because he's asking him, well, he needs clothes. He needs to go shopping.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked Marshall, he said, well, where should we go? He's like, that's like asking me who you are. I don't know who you are. But then he gets in the back seat and he's like, well, what's your situation? What are you looking for? What's going to happen? And he gets to know his story and really helps guide him, because Joe, like many of us, has lost his way.
Yeah.
Again, going back to that parallel of Walter Mitty, when his dad died, he lost who he was. And in this situation, it was something in the firefighters, and he lost who he was. And so I'm going to ask you a question. We didn't prep this, so I'm curious what's going to happen. When did you experience something like that? Where you were moving, life was going, and something happened and you sort of checked out and took the safer road out of fear?
Wow. Well, I'd love to be able to say never, but it's, I've taken the safer road a lot of times. I mean, relationally with, with my wife, with my kids, have been too chicken shit afraid to go into some things that might be a little uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that really comes to mind, kind of a moment, was I had a chance to move across the country for a different job with a company that I was excited about. They were excited about me, but they didn't have anything in Cincinnati. And they said, we can either go to Austin, Texas, or Portland, Oregon. and I like both those cities. And I used to say it was because my mom was kind of sick and she was getting older, and it'd be better if I was around. But if I'm completely truthful, Paul, it was because I was afraid, and I didn't take the leap. And now in hindsight, I mean, you can only understand your life in hindsight, and Christ worked through that, and now looking back, I wouldn't have it any other way, the way I lived my life. But at that moment, that was absolutely a fear-based decision that later he did redeem, and thank God for his redemption. But
right,
I operated in fear right then, for sure.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, it was just a question that was just like, oh no, ask this.
Sure.
So I was like, all right.
Yeah, and don't edit that out. That can be on there. That's fine.
Yeah, I do have another question I wanted to follow that up with, because this movie is about a man's journey to become who he was meant to be. In all intents and purposes, he's laying down his life for other people. It may not be with the best intentions or people with the best intentions, but we'll play a clip later about like what his motivation is. But this idea, we were asleep, we were dead. Something triggered that transformation for him. It's this diagnosis of brain cloud and this opportunity to die for a purpose. And so when you think back over your life, what moment was that sort of that pivot point that you're like, man, I was asleep, but ever since this happened, I've been, if not wide awake, waking up?
Yeah, for me, it was going to a boot camp, an event with the Ministry of Wild at Heart, and I'm sure anybody listening to this is very familiar with that ministry.
We talk about them once or twice.
yeah. We're vaguely familiar, and so going to that event in 2015, and what I didn't share, which is germane to our conversation here, Paul, is I entered that lottery and didn't say anything to my wife about it, because you have to. There's so many people, you kind of have to get picked. It's a lottery system.
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything to her, and I was working in Cleveland, across the state, when I got the email notification that I'd been selected, and I wasn't going to go, and it was straight up fear. And I remember talking to my wife and standing in my hotel room at the Hampton Inn, right in Euclid there, and talking with my wife, and I said, well, I'm not sure I want to go. It's there's a lot of cost. There's a lot of things going on right now, and she says, John Eldridge has been really important to you, and his writing has been really impactful for you. And she said, you tried to engage. You remember a couple of years ago, you tried to engage with this group, and she named a group, and you backed off. Yeah. You remember this group that you tried to engage with and you backed off? Yeah. And she went through 4 of them, 4 different groups, 4 different ministries.
You have fake balls.
Oh man, you are not even kidding, bro. I mean, you talk about being just choked out with fear. And she said, this guy is the guy who's probably been most impactful to you in your life. Why would you bail on this? And I said, okay, and I'll go. And I tell you, that was the event that I described earlier as being tectonic in my life. That the foundation plates of my life shifted at that point. And I was kind of awake before, but really feel like that was that was a trailhead that that I've been walking for the last 9 years now, and it keeps getting better and better. Ups and downs, right?
For sure.
Everybody loves adventure until you get a branch full of snow falling down your neck. There have been plenty of those.
You break your ankle on the 5 miles out.
Yeah, right. and that's been, something that has led me down to, some paths of ministry with some camps in a local church that we had talked about. And I met some of my closest friends through this. And, my life, my wife's life, my stepkids' lives have been completely transformed, through what Christ has done, through John and his guys, and many others. But I would say that would probably be my number one waking up moment for sure.
That's awesome. So as we go in Joe's story, we see him engage with Angelica, another Meg Ryan character who's, I love the term that her sister Patricia will use, is she's soul sick.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one who brings up suicide because she is depressed because she is dependent on daddy's money, versus her half sister, Patricia, who has been adamant about not taking daddy's money, not doing things, not being dependent on him. And so you see that again, that contrast and the interesting dynamic between the two of them.
Yeah, it really is. And they don't trust each other. They're
Right.
always, they always think that daddy's holding out on them or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
Yeah. And even when they're at the, in the car and Joe says, if she brings up suicide and after her, can we just take a minute and talk about the glory of her poem and how great that was? But he says, if it's just in killing yourself or doing something you're afraid to do, just do the thing you're afraid to do. And I think he's realizing, like, I just did what I was terrified to do, which was quit my job and, enter back in and re-engage with life. Like, he's like Maverick at the end of the movie. He's afraid to re-engage, but he did. And, what he found was, it's hard, but it's not that hard. And she just can't get past it. And, at the mere suggestion, she shuts it off. She bails. She says, okay, you must be tired. It's time to go. Right. And, it's just, that's she's over from there. Like, she can't even comprehend what that looks like. And the false security of daddy's money and, living, even though she's miserable, the unknown is so much worse for her. And she can't even fathom how bad that would be.
Right. That living in a miserable known is many times it feels safer than the unknown, because I don't know what discomfort that's going to bring. I know how this sucks.
Yeah.
And I don't want to keep harping on it and using the same phrase, but like if she was a dude, we'd say grow a pair, right?
Right.
There's like this idea of sack up, be a man. And I'm not, I don't want to get into the gender stereotypes and caricatures and all that.
Hey, this is Men at the Movies, man.
So he continues. Angelica drops him off at the pier with Patricia, who's also Meg Ryan. She plays 3 characters, and they're all got different accents, different motivations, and
totally different characters. And there's even a moment, if we can dwell on Angelica for just another moment, of, they're at after the dinner, he takes her back after this suicide talk, and she says, do you want me to come up? Do you want, I will give myself to you because I don't know what else to do. And Joe says, no, he's not looking for the false intimacy. He's looking for real connection, which you see, previously throughout the movie at this point. But then you see him on the pier and he just gives her just a very kind little peck on the cheek. And she just kind of straightens up and, he offers her just that little kindness, that little bit of strength. And then the last time we see Angelica, she's walking tall. She's almost got like a swagger about her. Like he gave her some confidence back, which I thought was real interesting. Again, when a man comes alive and offers his strength to a woman, instead of consuming her beauty, he offered her strength.
Right.
And the effect that it had on her was immediately noticeable. It's not always in real life, but it's a movie. This is magical realism. You kind of have to suspend a lot of disbelief to watch Joe versus Volcano, but it's, you see her and it's marked how different, just even that little 2.5 seconds on the screen, she's a different person. just from that one act of strength being offered to her.
So Joe and Patricia are stuck on a boat, little boat, big ocean, gonna have to engage somehow. So they do some fishing, which is just hilarious. And,
Oh, that hammerhead shark looked like Chunk from Goonies. It was so great.
yeah, it made the Jaws shark look like high def CGI. And I didn't know that sharks growled when they were out of the water.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's like the director told Spielberg, "Hey, we need a shark," and Spielberg's like, "I got it. I got a shark for you. Here's a shark."
Yeah. I think he rated the Muppet Show. But they're on the boat one night, and it's beautiful. Being out on the water, seeing the sky above you, having some gourmet. What a life that would be.
Oh yeah.
And Joe, because he's been, wrestling with some bigger questions these days, as facing your mortality will do. He asked her if, she believes in God. She's like, I believe in myself, blah, blah, blah. And she says, basically, what do you believe in? And he answers this funny question. I was like, when I think about myself, I get bored, basically. And then sort of goes off on a tangent that I think is appropriate to our conversation.
I start thinking about myself, I get bored out of my mind.
Well, what does interest you?
I don't know. Courage. Courage interests me.
So you're going to spend the rest of your life on a tiny island in the South Pacific?
Well, up till now, I've lived on a tiny island called Staten Island. Commuted to this job, a shut-up room, pumped in air, no sunshine, despicable people, and now that I have some distance from that situation, I find that unbelievable. Your life seems unbelievable to me. All of this, life seems unbelievable to me.
My father says that almost the whole world is asleep. Everybody you know, everybody you see, everybody you talk to. He says that only a few people are awake, and they live in a state of constant, total amazement.
So, Paul, listening to that clip, what stands out to you?
Yeah, courage. I mean, he hasn't told her at this point what he's about to do.
Right.
And, the definition of courage is not being afraid, but being afraid and doing the thing anyway. Right. And so, but he's not being ruled by fear. And he's realized that, he has lived that small story. He's lived all about, himself, in an oddball kind of way, going from being a heroic firefighter to saving kids to, only, existing in this terrible, pathetic room. And that, was about him and about safety. And now, as you said, he got some distance from it, that he can't even believe that he did that. And so, I know, different times, in my life, like I've looked at, we were even talking before we started recording about, my wife and I were chatting, this weekend about, who were those kids when we got married, we were completely different human beings, from who we are now. And honestly, I'm really glad because, the best parts of her and, hopefully the best parts of me have been retained. But, the way I think, the way I make decisions, what's important to me, I look back on from when I was a single guy and this, I would want to tell that guy to grow a pair and, and get with the program now. And again, it's a work in progress. And I would hope that all of us, I would hope that, in 2034, I would look back on my life today and think, who was that guy? And you want to be, continually growing and progressing and having Christ more formed in me and being more the man who he made me to be. That can only come through adventure and hardship and trials and all the other things, right?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. At the beginning of the year, me and my close friends, we went through the Souls Review, something that Morgan Snyder put out to look back for us, it was 2023 to then look forward at 2024. And a friend of mine, he looked at the questions, and there was a question about how did you change or transform over the year or grow? And he's looking then at that, and his answer is, I don't feel like I did. I don't feel like I grew. I don't feel like I've experienced transformation in that, calendar year of 2023. And so part of, as he looks forward, he's like, I don't want to have that same answer at the end of next year. I don't want to be doing this in January of 25, feeling the same way. And the interesting thing is the challenge and the pressure that has been put on him over the last couple months, the stuff that he's had to deal with. But when you look at it with that lens, when you're saying, well, we're not going to grow, we're not going to transform without some sort of catalyst, without some diagnosis of brain cloud, without, to a point, the typhoon that comes and leaves them shipwrecked or marooned on his the premier luggage of New York City, the giant steamer chests. And there's the scene where the moon comes up, and I'm going to play that at the very end, I think, where the moon comes up over the ocean, and he just says, "Thank you for my life." But he doesn't get to that moment without the diagnosis, without the shipwreck.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want the diagnosis. I don't want the shipwreck. I don't want to go through the rough storms. And that idea, like, good sailors, I can never remember this line. Good sailors aren't made in safe harbors. You have to sail through storms to become a good sailor.
Yes.
Like, the whole idea, what does it take to grow? A lot of shit.
Yes. Yeah. And, we do, my son is on the football team at our local high school, and, his buddies, we do a fire for them every week. And, and that's one of the recurring topics that we talk about, is that you cannot get to where you want to go without going through a lot of trial, a lot of hardships. And, they were complaining about the off-season training and how they're working harder in the off-season and they are, and they should.
You need to.
And I tell you, since football season, my son's put on about 12 or 15 pounds of muscle. He's getting faster, he's getting bigger, he's getting stronger. And, he's understanding in a very visceral way that, you don't grow without resistance.
Love that.
You can lose God in that very, very easily, right? And you can, talk about becoming your best self or fully realized as a human being. And it's got nothing to do with it. And it's more about, what Christ is doing in him. And football is a great metaphor for life, I think. Sports in general are, as are many other things, but this is kind of our, this is my son's, drug of choice, if you will. But it's, but that whole idea of if we don't go through the shit makes you grow, right? I mean, the hard times make you grow, and you have to, sweat out 2 days. You have to throw up on the sideline and, come home and be miserable and so sorry you can't move. And if you do that in August, then in October, you'll be better off in the playoffs. And so, we go down that rabbit trail all day long. This is not a sports podcast, but
yeah, for sure. And to me, that idea of there are few people who are awake, and when you're awake, actually, I want to flip that, because there's parts of us that are still asleep. I think as much as we engage with life and engage with following Jesus in our daily life, there's parts that are asleep still.
Yeah.
Like, we might be killing it. We might be engaging really well with our wife, but maybe slacking off, kind of head under the sand, under the covers with one of our sons or your daughter, or maybe you're doing great at home, but work suffering because you're just sort of showing up, going through the motions. I don't know. But as I'm reading through the Bible this year, I'm seeing myself more and more aligned with the disciples. Like, this is the disciples reacted this way. And how do I do that? How do I react when I go to Jesus and he's like, well, give them something to eat? This, like, just 2 chapters ago, he fed 5,000 and now you're stressed out about this time. Like, what's behind that? And then how often I feel that same way about Jesus of, am like, oh, I should do this better by now. Or here I am asking him to feed me again. But even looking at that aspect, Jesus sent the disciples into the storm.
Yes.
He's like, you guys go on ahead. I'll catch up. And like, from a disciple, how would that feel? Right out is like, am I disappointing him? Why is he sending us on ahead? Why is all this happening? The really strange thing is the disciples got scared twice in that. The disciples got scared when they saw Jesus walking on the water. And then they got scared again when Jesus got in their boat. And they're like, oh my gosh, who is this guy that calms, who can command the storm and the sea, who rules over everything? And he's in my boat. And they freak out.
Yeah. And it's the freak out of intimacy and closeness with that kind of power, right? And what are the implications of that? There's certainly a part of that's got to be, okay, what does that mean that I have to do now? What are my responsibilities now, and what's going to be demanded of me? The good news is, though, that he has got more resource than we could ever hope to need. I was with a guy, and he had fallen and broken a leg. We're in an outdoor, like an outside adventure type thing, and the medic showed up and was, how you feeling? And he's telling them all about this thing, and he had broken his leg. And the one medic says, well, the good news is we have more medicine than you have pain. And I think there's a lot of truth to that with Christ. Like, he has more resource than we have fear. And he has more joy than we have sorrow. And he has more peace than we have calamity and everything else. And that doesn't mean that, that we're not going to go through the storm. As you said, he's going to send us into the storm. But then he is offering us, his strength and his courage and his resource in the middle of that.
Right.
And so I can't, now sitting here in my, my warm office, that's dry here in Cincinnati, Ohio, I can't imagine a better place to be than with Jesus. And, I'm not out in the storm right now, which it actually is kind of raining, snowing outside right now. But you know what I mean? That's the absolute best place to be, because the creator of the universe put us there, and he knows what needs to happen. One note that I had too is, you talked about, I've wasted all this time, or maybe it was Joe that said that, I've wasted all these years. And like, one thing that Morgan likes to say is, you're right on time. And, even with Joe, I kept getting this sense this last time I watched it, like, it's never too late. Like, it's never too late. Like, you can always, like, even the thief on the cross, he was going to die within minutes. And he said, remember me. And Jesus said, you'll be with me in paradise. Like, it's never, ever too late. And that's, gosh, I mean, we could dwell on that for days and days and days.
I think that's a very interesting concept to bring up as I'm about to tee up this next clip. So Joe and Patricia, they make it to Wapani Woo. They go through their initiation, their ceremony, which is much more pleasant for the woman than it is for the man.
You don't want to get slapped with fishes and have octopus on your stuck to your face like an alien? Come on, man.
And so then he says, take me to the volcano. And Patricia comes up, and she has a really compelling argument. But so does Joe. But at the very end, what you just said, that keying on that idea of time, being out of time or not having enough time or running late. So many of us feel behind, especially when we start comparing ourselves to where other people are, which is always a dangerous thing. But so they're at the border of the volcano. Joe's getting ready to jump in his Armani tux. And
oh yeah.
And Patricia,
after he made his Shane Falco like entrance and the crowd goes wild. Oh, that was such a great moment in that movie.
And so Patricia interrupts and hears that conversation.
Wait! Stop right there! I love you. I've fallen in love with you. I've never loved anybody. I don't know how it happened. I never even slept with him or anything. And now you're gonna kill yourself.
Can you give us a minute? You love me?
Yes, I love you. I can feel my heart. I feel like I'm going crazy. You just can't die and leave me here on the stinking earth without you.
I've got to do it.
Why? Why? The chief doesn't even want you to do it. Do you, Chief?
Because I have wasted my entire life, and I'm going to die. Now I have a chance to die like a man, and I'm going to take it. I've got to take it.
I love you.
I love you, too. I've never been in love with anybody before, either. It's great. I am glad. But the timing stinks. I got to go.
I love that. I love you, too. It's great. The timing stinks. I got to go.
A little kiss on the cheek, and he's off into the volcano. It's great.
Right. I think that's what happens to us sometimes. All right, bear with me for just a minute because I'm processing this idea as we go. We feel like to this point we've wasted our lives. Joe's like, I have wasted my life. He hasn't wasted his whole life. Like, he did a lot of really good things as a firefighter. But he feels like he's wasted his life. He's wasted his chance. He's wasted his opportunity. I'm going to die. He believes he's going to die from a brain cloud in about 5 months. And in our response to feeling like we wasted our lives, to feeling like we need to make up for all the bad decisions and all the bad paths that we took, we overreact. And we's like, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to. We over engage with what we think is purpose. What we think is like, he found life. He found this amazing woman that they could share a life together with. And he's going to go through with it anyway. And I think that like that connects with me in that, how do I got to go. The timing sucks. Hey, this real purpose shows up, but because I've committed to something false and something sideways in an effort to make the waste worthwhile, I miss out on what the real gold is.
Yeah. A lot of that too is the fruit of that is generally shame and condemnation of, right. I'm going to course correct and I'm going to, flagellate myself and never, make this mistake again, whether it's, something dumb you said to your wife or a mistake you made at work or whatever. It doesn't matter what the consequences are. But the fruit of those, proclamations or those commitments that you make is almost never life.
Right.
And life is not to be found there. And yeah, to your point, he's choosing death because he made a commitment. Now, again, you got to suspend disbelief because it's the movie, but the principle is absolutely accurate. And, and she's doing her best to call him up out of that. And he's just determined.
She said, I can't imagine living on this stinking world without you. Now that I've experienced love, now that I've experienced you, I can't imagine.
She's awake now.
She's awake. Yeah. And because as you've been saying, is like when a man who's fully alive, he sort of life follows him. Life finds a way, as as some would say.
Sure. Well, and we're we as men we offer life. I mean, that's that's what we do from our the structure of our bodies to how God designed relationships to be. I mean, we're to go and give and bring life wherever we can.
Yeah.
And, and he does that to the triple Meg Ryan, the Meg Ryan triumvirate there. And, and Patricia's the only one who really responds. The other two don't know what to do with him.
Right.
But then when she responds, and now she's saying, wait a minute, this, you're just going to snatch, you're going to pull the rug out from under me. And then she decides, okay, well, life is, the next 45 seconds with Joe are better than life without him. So I'm going to go and I'm going to take his hand and jump in a volcano too.
Yeah. And that's going to be the last clip we're going to play is they get married. She's like, if you're going to go, I want to be married. And he's like trying to back out. She's like, why are you scared of commitment? It's like 30 seconds. And then she goes out and she says, I'm going with you. Again, going back to that dynamic of he's responding, I'm out of time. I have to go. I have to go do this. He sees his life as sacrifice for the Wapani Wu or for the Wapani.
Which is very noble in one sense.
Right.
Right. He's being the hero. Right.
And she says, even in your stubbornness, because you're choosing death over life with me, I'm going to choose death with you for all intents and purposes. And so this is the last clip as they're standing over the volcano, getting ready to jump. We find out that all hope is not really lost.
I'm jumping in with you.
Oh, no, you're not.
Whither thou goest, I go.
You didn't sign up for this.
I do what I want.
Don't do it for me.
I'm not doing it for you. Joe, nobody knows anything. We'll take this leap and we'll see. We'll jump and we'll see. That's life.
And that end scene, like, tears me up.
Yeah, same here.
Even when I was pulling the clips today, I was like, one, the love of a woman like that, like, again, like we were talking about, like the idea, like we can't imagine our lives without our wives. We like, that's like, sort of like when you look back, you're like, it doesn't even compute. And for her, she was like that with Joe. And he's like, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. Like, you're doing this because you want a purpose, sort of a death with purpose. Well, my purpose is with you. And so we're going to do this and we're going to do it together. And wrapping back up the original, you know what it takes to have a pair, to have a real set of balls, is to jump even when you think you're going to die.
Yes.
To jump even when you're scared, even when it appears hopeless. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what God calls us to do, is trust me.
Absolutely.
I'm going to be here. I'm here holding your hand. We're going to jump and we're going to see what happens. And that's life.
It absolutely is. And the fact that she is willing to commit to him after, I mean, she even says it there, I do what I want, which, I think that is probably more of a habitual reaction than the truth in that moment for Patricia, if I can, make that logic leap.
That's her pattern with her dad, right?
Totally.
Like, I'm not depending on you. You're not telling me what to do. I'm going to do what I want.
And she's never found a man worth committing her life to. And now that Joe has come alive and Joe is willing to, offer this strength to the Waponis, and, she realizes that, having experienced that she can't go back. And not to over spiritualize this, but, when
it's kind of what we do.
It is kind of what we do here. What I think it was it Dietrich Bonhoeffer that says, when Christ calls a man, he bids him to come and die. And this is a version of that, right? And I've discussed this many times with various dude groups that you tell your wife you'll give your life for her, and that's easy if you only got to do it once. I mean, that's no big deal. Right? I mean, if you only got to do it once, just whatever. It's 4 seconds of courage, and then and then take the bullet.
I was just thinking about what I shared about this morning. How I went out to clean,
Right.
like to pick up the house, and I see dishes everywhere in the kitchen. And I'm like, you know what? I had friends over last night. We watched the movie. Like I kind of figured the dishwasher would have been run, the dishes, the saucepan was still on the stove, all caked and all this.
Right.
And I wanted to be pissed. I wanted to text my wife. I wanted to say, I thought this was going to happen last night. But that's what dying is. That's what laying down your life looks like. It's, I'm going to do this, even if I feel overlooked, disrespected, taken advantage of. Laying down my life for her on the dailies might be taking out the trash without bitching about being the only one to ever take out the trash.
Yes. Yes.
And doing it not with a sense of resentment, but I love my wife and I'm going to do this for her.
Mm-hmm. And there is an element of sacrifice. And even, I mean, we see that with Joe when they're on the steamer trunks, after the Tweedledee crashes, right? I mean, he's given her
right
the little capfuls of Perrier and keeping her alive, right? And, and then he comes to his own realization, which I know we're going to get to, but he's literally offering her strength in that moment, his life. And it's a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
And, you're exactly right. Dying for your wife happens a little bit every day. And that's how you give your life to your wife, to your kids, whatever. And, I mean, for me, it might be coming home, at the end of a long day. And then, I get in, walk in the door, kiss on the cheek. Hi, honey, glad you're home. By the way, the dogs need to be walked. And, can you go pick up Joel at football practice? And, we got to talk about the budget tonight. And your mother called again, and that's before I even take my boots off sometimes. So,
right.
But
I think it also looks like what you described over your Christmas holiday with your daughter is she was home. So she was your focus.
Yes.
Work died basically during those weeks.
Yep.
So that you could give her your full attention and your presence.
And it was great. And in those moments, like when I made that decision, like, and I'm sure you've experienced that too. Like sometimes it's a pain in the butt, but sometimes it's great, and my daughter loves cinnamon rolls and I figured out a good cinnamon roll recipe. And so, it is an absolute joy to get up at 4 a.m. to put those things together so that, she can have cinnamon rolls, in the morning, and we get to sit there and, enjoy a breakfast together. When I'm in that right state of mind, though, I wish it was more like that all the time.
Right. When you're living out of your strength.
Yes. When the story is not about me, when I'm not the main character. Right.
I think in those moments, we're living knowing we've got a real set of balls, knowing we are fully alive, fully awake. We're not looking to the world around us to give us our balls, to say that we're a man, to say that we're validated. We're saying, no, I know who I am. If that's good enough for me, it should be good enough for anybody I come in contact with, right?
Absolutely. And a gelding does not bring life. You get
no,
right,
no.
And you got to have a full set if you're going to offer life to somebody.
Yeah.
We keep coming back to genitalia. Awesome. That's great.
I know this has been a very middle school kids would love this podcast. So Paul, thank you for stepping into your fear, stepping into the podcast and being willing to share your thoughts and have this conversation. I appreciate your time and your sharing your experience and your life with us.
Likewise, man. Paul, really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit, and looking forward to more conversation, whether that's about movies or life in general or whatever that happens to be.
That sounds awesome. And so, as I mentioned before, I want to close with sort of the action items, the reminders that, as we've been saying, it's not too late to go out and live your life.
Dear God, whose name I do not know, Thank you for my life. I forgot how big thank you. Thank you for my life.
You have some time left, Mr. Banks. You have some life left. My advice to you is live it well.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?